In today's video, I am going to be breaking down the 2-2-1 half-court trap that you can run with your team. This is actually very good, especially at the middle school age. So let's get down and let's check this out. But really quickly, if you want another really deadly defense, make sure to go check out my perimeter basketball defense book. That is absolutely deadly for teams that try to run plays like 5-out. And other plays that really try and utilize the three-point shot. So if you want to try and shut that down, go check out my perimeter basketball defense book that is down in the description below. Okay, so just as the title is basically saying, it's a 2-2-1, which means there's two players up top, there are two players in the middle, and there is one single player at the back. I actually run this just slightly different than some coaches, so I am going to be showing you how I like to run it, but also how some other coaches run it as well. So generally speaking, you're not going to be trapping up top. I personally like to trap up top. That's what I'd like to do. However, most coaches just try and force the ball into the corners so that they can trap the corners. How they do that is these two top players usually play a bit close and they force the player towards the sideline. How they're able to do this, so let's just say there's some basic version of a press or breaking a half-court trap. Generally speaking, most teams are going to try and put a player up in the middle and players in the corner. If they're not trying to do that, then generally speaking, this is how they're going to be setting up. And they want to try and feed the corner, feed the baseline, or what they'll try and do is try and feed the corner, and then he has two options to try and get to corner or middle. That's essentially what most teams try and do. My way of beating a half-court trap is just like this. Getting a guy in the middle, and you want to try and feed the middle, and if they try to overplay the middle, then the sideline's open, and then you can attack and whatever else. But that's my way versus everyone else's way. Let's do everyone else's way first. So at this point, you're faced with two players. You have to pass to the right or to the left side. When that happens, let's say we pass to the left side. Generally speaking, if we are not trapping up top, then it's going to be a player in single coverage covering the middle of the key trying to force baseline. When this happens, player 4 starts to kind of move over. Player 3 starts to move over to this side of the key. Player 5 starts to drop. Player 1 starts to cover middle. So essentially we are still in that 2-2-1. Player 2 then, let's say, passes to player 3. Now we get the trap. If player 2 wants to try to pass back up middle, player 1 needs to intercept that and go the rest of the way and score. If you have a player who has a plus when it comes to his wingspan over height. So for example, my nephew David is 6'3" with a 6'8" wingspan. If you have a player like that who has a much greater wingspan than his height, you would generally in this zone would either like to put him at the back where it's the single player, or you can put him at the front line so that now you can get those interceptions much easier, so you can go down and get basically an easy layup. So there's kind of two spots where you can put him. Generally, your bigger players are going to be in the middle of that 2-2-1, so that second line of that 2-2-1. If player 2 passes down to player 3, this is when they are going to try and trap. Now, when this happens, player 5 is going to move over to this post and cover that post. Player 1 is going to drop generally to about that free throw line and try and cut off any passes here. And player 2 is going to get down to about the perimeter extended, maybe even the free throw line extended, but to me that's too close. Player 2 will generally get down to the perimeter extended. When this happens, if player 5 is or at least if their strategy is what a lot of coaches run up here in Canada, if player 5 is the one who tries to cut, this should be pretty well cut off by one of those two players. Now let me explain to you the actual makeup of the zone. So generally speaking, your two fastest or longest players, so the players with the longest wingspan or your players who have the greatest speed will be up top. Your second line are going to be your bigger players who are generally going to be a little bit slower. Player 3 needs to be the same type of player as player 1 and 2, which is either going to be a fast player who has height, or he has to have a big plus on his wingspan. The reason why players 1 and 2 need a plus on their wingspan is if there was a trap here, or if he wanted to pass back to middle, then player 1, for example, will have a greater chance of stealing it if he has a greater wingspan. Versus if the ball gets passed down here, and then there is the trap. So let's put these guys back to where they were. If there was a trap, then generally speaking, somebody with a greater wingspan will cut off more of a passing lane, so that now it is almost impossible to be able to pass out of it because he's got long arms. If somebody was setting up in the middle, and let's just say you run a press break similar to mine, where generally it'd be player 5 who would be in the middle and 2 would be up here. So let's say we're running something like how I would run it. Well, I would be still having player 2 force baseline. Player 4 is still going to be playing force baseline, trying to force the ball to go this way. Player 5 is going to be playing right behind player 5, but giving a little bit of space so that he can reach around if the pass was to go there. So if the pass was to go to the middle, he needs to be able to reach around without touching player 5 to deflect the ball. Not to steal it, but to deflect it. If he was to steal it, then of course we can go back in the opposite direction in basically a 3-on-2 situation. Now, if you wanted to trap the top, like I like to trap the top, this is how you would be able to do it. So let's go back to the most coaches' way of beating a half-court trap. These guys are going to be close together to try to force that situation to the corners. Player 1 passes to 2. Now this has to be quick. Those 2 players trap. Player 3 moves over. Player 5 moves down to the block. Player 1 moves to the point. At this point, the option to pass back to middle is there, but player 1 should be fast enough to cut that off, depending on the size of the court. Now, it's a lot easier to run this style of trap if teams are dribbling the ball up one side or the other, because that allows my team to shift over so that there's lesser distance to be able to trap and lesser distance for players to be able to move to cover their spots. So make sure to go check out my perimeter basketball defense book if you want an absolutely deadly defense to shut down those 3-point shooters of other teams. Now, hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys again in my next video.